I'm your host, Hillary Bricken, and this is the Cannabis Law Now podcast, where we regularly discuss issues related to the cannabis industry, including investment, day-to-day operational issues, and potential reform on the horizon that will impact all cannabis businesses and investors in the United States. Welcome, everybody. On today's episode of the Cannabis Law Now podcast, I am so glad to have with me Andy Butts, who is the founder and owner of Humboldt Trim Company. And he is a very special guest because he is a generational farmer in the Emerald Triangle in California, famed region in the state for cannabis production and distribution. Welcome, Andy.
Hey, Hillary, how's it going?
Hey, it's going good. And normally when I broadcast, listeners know I just launch right into the questions because this is a conversational podcast where we want to get down to the nitty gritty of your everyday. I got to ask, many people want to know because it's so legendary. And maybe for those of my listeners who maybe don't know what the Emerald Triangle is, what is it like cultivating in that region of California? And maybe even before you get there, what is the Emerald Triangle for those who don't know?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Emerald Triangle is generally considered Humboldt, Mendocino, and Trinity counties. And these are rural Northern California, way north of San Francisco in the Bay Area. Along the coast, we have incredible natural beauty with the ocean and the mountains and the rivers and the redwoods and some of the cleanest air in the world, and also some of the most rural regions in all of the United States. So it's a perfect recipe for what started in the 70s as the Back to the Land movement and kind of that hippie culture and hippie values, and people started growing marijuana back then is what it was called, but now it's called cannabis. So people started growing weed out in the hills, started breeding and crossing, and the genetic diversity just kept building and building and building, which is the root for a lot of the strains that the industry uses now. It was all developed up here in the Emerald Triangle since about the early 70s till present day.
That's very cool. I feel fortunate to represent. Now it's been winnowed down, but probably a half dozen legacy farmers up there. And that type of farming in that region is just so unique. Whenever I think about it, I always think of sun-grown, harvested cannabis, truly the closest you can probably get to organic, since we don't have that standard with the USDA or even on-label pesticides with the EPA. I just always envision the Emerald Triangle as the most natural place for cannabis cultivation, kind of the cradle of civilization in California, for the source of some of its most famous cannabis. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, it's for what we'll call modern cannabis, because of course this plant has been around for tens of thousands or millions of years and has been used by human beings for so many things for as long as people have been around. But in this modern cannabis world, Humboldt County is like ground zero. Myself, I started in 1997. That's when I came to this area, and I started growing in these guerrilla gardens way out in the hills. We were hiding from helicopters, like dually blade helicopters with guys with M16s hanging out the door, circling very slow and very low over your homestead, just looking for a marijuana plant, and we survived the largest U.S. military action on its own citizens. To this day, sometimes it was referred to as the hippie lottery, and some people would win and some people would lose. And it's kind of an interesting thing. I always thought humorous. It's like that statement that everyone probably grew up with, like money doesn't grow on trees, that you would tell your kids. Well, around Humboldt County, that was we didn't use that one too much.
Yeah, I have no doubt that the federal government has a very special relationship with the Emerald Triangle. And what I want to talk about a little bit today as we go through this, because I haven't had a generational farmer on, and frankly, there's not many left. You're not going to find one in New York. You're not going to find one in Illinois like you will in Northern California, Southern Oregon. How has it been for Humboldt Trim Company navigating legalization in California since 2018? And I know for some of my other clients, and just anecdotally, can be really tough to get generational farmers into this highly regulated fold, let alone the program that California put out there. So how has it been for you and your company in navigating?
Yeah, it's, I think that was around the time that you and I first spoke. And I remember you said, Andy, look, it's going to be a race to the bottom. Depending on how these regulations take shape, it's going to determine how soon or how late that's going to happen. But it's definitely going to happen. And that made me realize, like, well, I probably need to look in, like, really start following this closely and really paying attention. And I'm going to need more licenses in the supply chain. So that's when I started Humboldt Trim Company, and it's been 5 years in the making. I mean, most of us came to this area for not to be the CEO of a business. We came here to like just be out in nature and enjoy a simpler lifetime, kind of drop out and tune in and back to the land. I came here to be an organic farmer. I was interested in organic farming. So, we're not MBAs, we're not lawyers, we're not doctors, but we've had to take this crash course. My wife and I, we always say we've graduated from YouTube University, like, because you can just learn so much out there on YouTube about anything, really, business included. So like many of us, we made huge mistakes in structuring our companies and partnerships and all of those things. And it's kind of all settled now. We currently, Humboldt Trim Company, well, I have a farm. I've always had a farm that's Organobliss. It's a 10,000 square foot outdoor cultivation. And then in the town of Eureka, we have our processing. We do processing. So that's like a service for trimming and packaging and making pre-rolls. Also, we have a micro business, which is distribution, manufacturing. And we're very, very close to finally getting our retail built out and opened up. And, we're on a shoestring budget. We're a mom and pop. It's a husband and wife team. We check like every equity box there is, but, that doesn't really help us.
And did Humboldt Trim Company or you and your wife, did you operate under Proposition 215, the law that essentially predates Prop 64? It's the medical only law in California. And if you did, how is that different than what you're doing today with Prop 64?
We hadn't really incorporated a company. What we had was a mutual benefit nonprofit. And, Proposition 215, I mean, it was either the greatest law or the worst law ever written. It pretty much, we all became pharmaceutical companies, and we were protected with doctor-patient privilege and the benefits of decades of lobbying. And the state really had its hands tied with that one. You couldn't get a jury to convict anyone for growing cannabis all of a sudden. And so it took quite a bit for like law enforcement and just towns and cities and counties to like wrap their head around this law that just became law without anybody really understanding how to interpret it. So we definitely did. And that was great. And the medical push, it was the first cannabis legalization in the United States. So it really paved the way in a lot of ways. And it had such little language. It was just awesome, really. The good old days.
And on the back of that, what do you think? Give me like your top two, the things that California has done right with legalization.
That's a tough one. I mean, it's hard to really pinpoint anything that's been successful. So like they came out with great ideas, like appellations and organic certification. I think the pesticide testing and the strong rules around public safety are something California can hang its hat on at the end of the day and feel good about. I feel proud to be able to pass California standard and put out like a really clean product. And it really exposed a lot of what was going on in the industry before testing, like people we just didn't really know. And we still don't know what the health effects are of smoking all of these pesticides and herbicides. Yeah, so there's that. And, just bringing more normalization to cannabis in the society at large. Now, it just really shifted, like full legalization and recreational legalization has really shifted the paradigm of our whole country. Now, athletes, it's more normalized, celebrities, grandma is like a little bit open to smoking a little weed for her pain or rubbing some ointment on her knees for her arthritis, these kinds of things, which they might have never, ever done. Like my mom, like sent me a picture. She was in a pot shop somewhere, like on the East Coast, and like I mean, I thought that day would never come, you know. And she was kind of like,
I mean, if I could say my top two things would probably be they got delivery right because there are still states that don't allow that. And that's just great access for people to have to make the experiment work. And then consumption lounges, I think, would be on my list too. There are still states that don't allow that, and talk about normalizing things. And in that vein, and well, I'll just keep it to two because this list is probably much longer. What do you think California has gotten wrong with legalization?
of all the problems in all of cannabis, pretty much nationwide, I feel, this is my own personal belief, all arrows point to allowing unlimited cultivation in California and issuing, you can get one medium license, which clearly says they understood the intent of Proposition 64, but you can get 500 or 1,000 small licenses. And that just made such massive oversupply that we're still feeling the effects of today. It's like there's so much weed being grown legally, and only a small fraction of that makes it into a package and makes it into a consumer's hands that they purchase through a legal shop. And if we can't address that, it's like everything else is kind of a side effect of that, in my opinion.
I think it's an open secret that California has an oversaturation issue with lack of enforcement, and that a lot of that product is being diverted over state lines and who knows where else for people to make ends meet because it's so expensive, as you know, to undertake these particular enterprises. What about Humboldt County? Because California is a heavy local control state, just like with liquor and spirits when it comes to cannabis. That was part of Prop 64. Do you think Humboldt County did a good job regulating you guys?
I mean, Humboldt County originally came out with this great pathway for basically rural cultivators to make a legal business where, they changed the general plan, they allowed you to develop a commercial business, to convert from your like Proposition 215 grow site or grow sites. In that case, there was about 15,000 documented grow sites. And then that had been consolidated down into 1,800 permits. And now we have about 600 licensed farms in Humboldt County. And they're, environmentally speaking, they're incredible. They're really the most environmentally superior farms that are happening anywhere, not only just in California, but anywhere. There's not another industry that's subjected to the same pesticide rules and testing that we are, the same kind of water quality things. We have to catch and store all of our water by the rain. This is not on a municipality. It's not been touched with bleach. It's like right off the ocean, hits our mountains, and we're catching that living water. And that's what's going into our plants. We all grow in soil.
Yeah, they're not doing it in LA, that's for sure. And are you, as a farmer, you're clearly invested. You have survived this long, which is saying a ton, Andy, because many people have failed, flamed out, lost everything, but you're still going. Are you keeping your eye on any specific state legislation right now that you think could improve California's cannabis industry, make it stronger, maybe winnow down some of this oversupply?
I mean, they won't touch oversupply. They just, even though it said they would only make the large license type if there was a need for it, like, oh, we need more cannabis, right? Let's make the large license type. Instead, they made the large license type with the most bolstering black market that's ever existed right alongside their legal market. And so it's like people just don't go into shops to buy the same weed for twice as much, really. And why should they? And again, it comes down to enforcement. There's no enforcement. I mean, just look around California. It's a dumpster fire out there. The other thing that just now has come on is like hemp and THCA, which is like an unregulated industry that we now have to compete against. And it just keeps getting more complicated and trickier. But, what I'm finding is that the people that like myself and my wife and a lot of the small farmers that have been here a long time, we don't have huge overhead. We show up every day, we do the work. We're not collecting this huge salary and like we're just grinding and grinding and grinding, slowly building, slowly surviving. and I think that we all believe there's light at the end of the tunnel. And, I don't want to say holding out for that. Like, you have to have an incredible passion for this plant that's beyond just dollars. And I think that's why it's so slow to roll out. Like, there's something about the spirituality nature of this plant and human beings. It just does not want to be controlled by a few people. It really wants to be spread out and bring peace to the world, and it doesn't want to be like so corporatized and dominated and manipulated, even though those forces are very, very present, very strong. There's still this underground world of it.
Yeah, I believe it. I know it. And it all goes into the identity of this industry. I don't think you can have one, the corporatized interest, without the other, meaning the two can coexist in some ecosphere, even as this shakes out. And towards that end, do you consider Humboldt Trim Company to be a craft cannabis cultivator? We throw around craft a lot. A lot of people only know what that means in the liquor context, but do you consider your company to be a craft cultivator?
I mean, it's another term that people use that we haven't really defined, like what is meant by craft. I do. I consider myself as a 10,000 square feet or less outdoor light depth. The owners touch the plant. We're not using illegal labor. We really are out there on our farms, at our homesteads, working with the plant, taking really, really good stewards of the land and care about, all those things. That what I feel would be part of the definition of what craft would be. But yeah, I think that craft, artisanal, small family farms, these words all go in hand. And I think they're in high demand, but it's just like that education to the consumer. We used to have this thing like know your grower, and it's really, there's so much disconnect between the farmer and the consumer. Like, you have to go through distribution and then through retail and all of these steps and all these processes. And so you had asked about like a bill, like currently there's AB 1111. That's easy to remember. And that would allow, farmers to be able to sell direct to consumers only at events only where there's event licenses, which is a step in the right direction, so maybe that it looks like it's got some legs and some support. Definitely the state and the DCC is sympathizing with small farmers. In all the conversations I've had with regulators, they're just as frustrated as everyone else, like just trying to navigate this. It doesn't really make us feel great, but they do express those frustrations.
I think about all of the amazing wine regions in California, right? From the Central Coast to Napa, Sonoma. You can go to the vineyard, you can see the grapes, you can touch the grapes, you can talk to the vintner. It's all done right there. And of course, they can have direct to consumer sales. It's all part of the experience in building the brand, but also maintaining product integrity. I think it's not a pipe dream, but it seems so hard to get there for cannabis because of the politics in play. Do you think that there is a future for craft cannabis? Because I'm with you. I don't always think that craft cannabis means I have to have this really unique strain that isn't homogenous with more corporatized type strains that just come off of a conveyor belt. I don't even know if you can really have that in cannabis. I do think it's more about a farmer intimately involved with their product, similar to farm to table, where you know exactly what you're getting, all of the sources, the people behind it, the care that's being taken, and of course, cultivation techniques. But do you see a future for craft cannabis in California and beyond? We have such a strong wine culture in California.
Absolutely. And I think it's what people really want from cannabis. Like a lot of us, we were drawn towards this because it was an alternative. A lot of people recognize it as an alternative medicine, an alternative high, for therapy, for spiritual purposes. There's so many reasons. And when you put those values together with like corporate scale cannabis, they just don't always meet. And I think just in general, like our culture in America, we're really hungry for something real, like something that's like can tell a story. We're just a little tired of the pop culture of consumerism. And when it comes to cannabis, it's like my hope for our region is that these values of regenerative and sustainable agriculture, organic farming, environmental stewardship, craft and small batch, sun-grown, artisanal, unique varietals, the Humboldt and Emerald Triangle brand recognition. That's like really what we're working towards. That's what we believe in, and the concern for sun growers when we talk about that in things like nationwide distribution or farm to, direct to consumer is that, we just don't know what that language will look like. I mean, they could cut us all out with just requiring GMP facilities. Like, boom, no one's ever going to be able to afford that. And you're all out. You're all sidelined. Everyone that's in this industry today is sidelined for that one sentence, maybe, in a federal cannabis policy. The fact is we don't need much as sun growers from the ancillary cannabis industry. We don't buy lights. We don't buy, all of those things, HVACs and, and all of those things that go with like indoor cultivation and mixed light cultivation, greenhouse. And, like we've seen it in other states where sun grown just isn't even on the table. It's kind of a rulemaking thing where they talk about mold and yeast counts in the testing that pretty much makes all sun-grown and greenhouse cannabis. It's so almost nearly impossible. You probably had to deal with that in Washington early on, and eventually they just kicked it out. They're like, this is, this doesn't make any sense. It's not making anyone sick, and it's not really a problem, but we're seeing how the industry, it's in their financial interest to have like a policy like that in a state that pretty much makes everything indoor and dependent on that industry. So those are the concerns we have as we see, like, what would a national policy look like? What would that, ideally there's like anyone who grows less than an acre can sell direct to a consumer through the mail anywhere where it's allowed in the world, just like wine or something like that. That would be like my hope and dream. We would have a good life that way,
It is a fascinating policy discussion that you don't hear about a lot. When Washington first went, it was unheard of that people would grow outdoors in the sun, despite being east of the Cascades, which is pretty good wine country, right? It's Willamette Valley, Columbia River Gorge. There's a whole farming community there. Obviously, including for wine, apples, cherries. And it blew people's minds that outdoor sun-grown was going to be an option because until then, like California, everything was done indoors out of sight. It was so stigmatized. And now, instead of being a stigma, it seems more political, misunderstood, a smaller voice in the room when we have this huge wine industry, built on these outdoor experiences with farmers and vintners. It's pretty ironic. And I certainly hope that there's a conversation where sun-grown is in the room. It should be on all of these things moving forward. It's such a big part of farming culture anyway. And do you think, in that vein, one of the things I think California did right, and it knows intimately, is its appellations program for cannabis. I think it's hugely important to bolster those brands, especially in our very legitimate farming communities, outdoor sun-grown. Are you participating in that? Do you plan to participate in that program?
We all were really excited about that at first. We're like, wow, because Napa's just a few counties away. We have wine here in Humboldt as well, and all around us, and there's small vineyards, and they're all still here. They're not collapsing and folding and going out of business. And so we've always said that, like, Humboldt is the Napa of weed. There's two things with the appellation. Like, one is that there's also in the rules, like county name, there's pretty strict thing. Like you can't, to use the name Humboldt County in a cannabis product, it has to be grown here. It has to be trimmed here. It has to be manufactured here, packaged here. And then from there, it can go out into the market. To break that down further into appellations and say like, oh, well, Salmon Creek or the Mattole Valley, these, it has a unique terroir and distance from the ocean and elevation and all of these things. We've been doing like all the groundwork over the last few years in these regions, but we just are not seeing a value add for any of it. There's only, I want to say 3 or maybe 4 brands left that even bear the name Humboldt on their packaging.
Is it because consumers don't care, or is that it's undermining marketing? It just doesn't matter. Why do you think that is?
Believe me, everyone tried, but you have to get paid. And And retailers have stolen millions and millions and millions of dollars from cultivators, and they continue to do till today. I mean, just look at the numbers. How many hundreds of millions of dollars are owed to the state in taxes? Before they changed it just to the retail section, it was like 250 million. All of that was cultivation tax that came from the growers. Now the retailers are in a big mess because they're the ones that have to pay the tax, not the distributor anymore. So they're coming knocking on the door with cops, breaking NTMs, breaking safes, cleaning out registers, collecting their tax. It's pretty scary. So, these retailers are also struggling. So the last person to get paid is the small farmer way up there in Humboldt, doesn't have the bandwidth or the resources to make a delivery in LA of a half a pound or something, and so those are some of the big problems. It's just there's no money in it, Hillary.
I see. Because retail is fighting to survive, they're not exactly concerned about having an appellation-based label or paying for it, paying the premium. Okay. And then, Andy, last question for you. It's on everybody's minds. Everybody's watching it. No one knows what the heck's going to happen. What would a Schedule 3 on the Controlled Substances Act, a move from 1 to 3 by DEA, mean for Humboldt Trim Company? Does that prospect excite you? Does it worry you?
I'm just kind of like, what are we going to take one baby step towards maybe competing against hemp? Like where are we going with this? Like, why are we still holding it back? It makes no sense to me. More than half the states have some legalization. The others want it. It's like, I feel like our representatives in Congress has failed, the citizens in terms of cannabis. And, and there's real forces against it. We're competing against pharmaceuticals. We're competing against alcohol, all of these things. Those are very, very strong groups. Of course, it really depends on how that language is developed, how it's interpreted, how it's enforced, how it gets challenged legally. I mean, I'd love to have some normalcy in banking, not having to pay the banking cannabis fee, and maybe get some financing that's not at predatory rates, taking out the 280E, maybe refunding the 280E. Come on. Those would be, refund that 280E. Give us a chance, man. That's just evil. The 280E, holding people back like that is just like really, really, this industry, if anybody's listening to this that's not in the cannabis industry, you don't want anything to do with it. It's a really, really hard. Maybe someday it'll be better, but only through fighting and grinding, like really, really earning it. But, we love it. We love this plant. Like me, I don't even smoke weed. I don't use it at all, but I believe in it. I believe that it wants to bring peace to the world. Like it's just hard to be so upset when you can just chill with your bros and smoke a joint and kick it back. It's a medicine. It's such a powerful medicine. It can, like the compassionate use of cannabis should never be underestimated. We don't need opiates. We don't need all of those things. You can reduce your pain. You can die gracefully. You can, heal yourself. You can grow it yourself. It doesn't cost you anything really, to grow it in your backyard, make your own tincture, make your own salve. There's a real connection when you grow your own herb and you use it, whether it's cannabis, whether it's rosemary, whether it's thyme, any of these things. Like grow something, grow a plant, have a connection with it, like get outside, get your hands in the dirt, like it's so real and it's so needed. And we're so deprived of this connection with Mother Earth and this nature and these circles and rhythms of life. And so that's kind of our mission, is to bring these values to the world and show people like, this plant it should be free. It should be freed. And the whole history of making it illegal and the devil's weed and all of that is just a wrong step in the world. And who's the government? I thought we were free. Who's the government to say what you can and cannot grow or use or try or experiment with or share, So that's why we do it.
Well, wise words from my generational farmer guest. Andy Butts of Humboldt Trim Company. I really appreciate you coming on, Andy. It's a very good and different perspective that you brought to this episode. Thank you for that.
You bet, Hillary. Anytime.
Thanks.
And that concludes today's episode of the Cannabis Law Now podcast. Until next time, stay alert, stay alive.